You are not a bad teacher. You're not even a bad business person. Your system is broken. If you feel like you're running on fumes, chasing your tail, just cramming students into your schedule, never feeling like you have a moment to rest, a moment to think, a moment to play your instrument, you are not alone. But it doesn't have to be this way. This music teacher life doesn't have to be like this. And I see so much advice online, so many comments, so many even suggestions that is based on a model that doesn't make any sense, that isn't gospel, that doesn't have to be this way. I came to piano teaching from a slightly different angle than some of you. I studied fashion in college. Now, I taught piano before I even studied fashion in college, but I taught piano as a teenager, all the way through college. Then I went into the fashion industry. And then I came back to teaching. And it's when I came back to teaching, with my new design brain that I had gotten from my degree, that I started saying, wait, what? Why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? Do we have to do that this way? That, plus the power of the online teaching community and the amazing power of the internet for opening up all these different possibilities, made me realize we don't have to do it this way. We don't have to have a system of having 30-minute lessons with every student. No one from on high said we should do that. If you go back and ask anyone, ask Chopin, ask Beethoven, ask anyone you like, they didn't say we had to do that. No one did some research and decided that 30 minutes was the perfect lesson length. It just sort of happened. Like a lot of things in our society, it just sort of happened that way. It wasn't designed that way, and it's not in the best interests of most people. 30-minute lessons, and the systems built around that are burning teachers out. Now look, I'll say it right from the start. I'm not actually saying you should never teach 30-minute lessons. I'm saying you should question them. You shouldn't take them as read. You shouldn't take them as, this is just what we do, so this is what I'll do. Even if I hate it, we don't have to do it. We don't have to. I promise you, you don't. You can if you want to. You can teach 15-minute lessons, 10-minute lessons, 5-minute lessons, if that's what you want to do and what you think works for your students in your studio. But you can also teach longer lessons. And you can also explore different lesson formats. And here's the reason that's so important. It's not actually about the length of time. I know it sounds like that's what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is the cramming of a schedule. We've sort of decided, mostly unconsciously, 30-minute lessons are the minimum length of time that you can get anything done in. We didn't actually decide it was the optimum time. We decided it was the minimum time. And we went for the minimum, I believe, in most cases, because many, many teachers think the only way they can make enough money is if they teach the maximum number of students. And if you think, I need to teach the most students possible, and 30-minute lessons are the minimum that I can get anything done in, then you're going to stick with them. Because that's how you can maximize your schedule. But if you have this mentality of, I must teach as much students as possible, you end up cramming students in. You don't give yourself any breaks. And I'm sorry, but you're not the best teacher you could be. Because if you don't have any breaks in your schedule, if you just teach from whenever is the earliest possible time to teach in your location, whether you manage to teach early hours or whether it's after school or whatever, until as late as possible, many cases, let's say 9 p.m. because that's when your neighbor will start banging on the wall saying, shut up, right? If you do that, you can't be the best teacher you could be. You can't enjoy every lesson. You can't put any or enough effort into preparing those lessons. You're just churning students through a conveyor belt. You might be lovely to them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're terrible. I'm just saying you're not the best version of your teacher self. Or probably your outside teaching self, right? What about your personal life? Do you just finish work and then collapse? And then finally get yourself up and going again when it's time to teach again? If so, I diagnose you with too many students. Now, I'm not delusional. I know that financial realities exist. I know that you have to teach a certain amount to make money. I know that most likely your hours are limited by the after-school schedule, in many cases, unless you teach like homeschoolers or adults or something. And if that's the case, you want to use all those hours, because if you take a break, you're wasting the limited time that you have available to teach. And you might even look at it as, yes, I teach from 2 to 7, but that's only 5 hours. Most people have an 8-hour working day. And to that I say this. Are you not doing any work outside those 5 hours, first of all? Bet you are. Second of all, most people don't work 5 hours without stopping. In fact, where I come from, that's not legal. So a boss wouldn't be allowed to do that to you. And you need to stop doing it to yourself, because it's not good for you and it's not good for your students. Now, as I said, those financial realities exist. But I just want you to step back for a moment and really ask yourself, am I charging the maximum I could for my time? Because if you're not, then the maths isn't mathing, right? It doesn't fit. If you're saying the only way for me to make enough money is to teach this many students, 50, 100. I mean, I've heard crazy numbers. The only way for me to do that is to do this, but you haven't raised your rates in 5 years. Then that's not the only way for you to make that income. You could lose several students and still make the same amount of money if you just raised your rates. If you're absolutely sure that this is the maximum students will pay, parents will pay for lessons, that's a different story. But in most cases, that is not the story. That is not the true answer. The answer is we just default to busyness. We default to I'll just do more, when we could do smarter. This video is brought to you by Vibrant Music Teaching. Struggling with lesson planning or student engagement? VibrantMusicTeaching.com has the solution. Discover a library of fun, effective teaching tools designed to make lessons exciting for you and your students. Connect with teachers worldwide and gain fresh ideas to keep your teaching inspired. Sign up now at VibrantMusicTeaching.com and bring new life to your lessons. Now let's consider the option of not 30-minute lessons, right? First of all, if you don't want to consider that, just at least take my advice about the rates thing, because you're probably, I hate the phrase leaving money on the table because it sounds like swindling people to me, but you're probably cutting yourself short of the experience you could be having in your piano lessons while making the same amount of money with teaching fewer students. Now, let's think about the 30-minute thing. What if you didn't, right? What if you didn't teach 30-minute lessons anymore? What would you do? What would you prefer if you could teach anyway? If you arrived in this piano teaching world and the default wasn't 30-minute lessons, you did your surveys of like, I'm in this alien world, I'm going to teach piano. What do people do here in terms of teaching piano? And you found out some teachers teach 45-minute lessons. Some teachers do 15-minute lessons 5 times a week. Some do buddy lessons. That's me. Where they have students for 60 minutes, but 30 of those minutes, half of the time, is shared with another student. So it's like a hybrid format. Some teachers do groups. Some teachers teach for 3 hours. If all of the possibilities were equally available, what would you love to do? Not what would people pay for. What would you love to do? Start there. And then see if you can make that possible, because you might be surprised that actually you could, lose 2/3 of your studio, teach 45-minute lessons, and feel like you had room to breathe, room to properly teach those students, and make the same amount of money, or make more money. It might be possible. Or you could do buddy lessons, as I say, like me, and have still 30 minutes one-on-one with a student, but also have another 30 minutes where you get to be with multiple students. I have 2 to 4 students in a group. You might have just 2. To start off with, especially as a solo teacher, that's the only way it works out scheduling wise. And when they're together, you can play games and you can improvise and you can compose and you can do all of the things that never fit into your 30-minute lessons. So what would that experience whichever one appeals to you, feel like to you? And then, what would it be like for your students? How would it be better? How would it be worse? If you think it would be in some way. In most cases, it would be better. I mean, that's just a reality. If they had more time with you, you'd be able to cover stuff more thoroughly. You'd be able to explore more different things. And I'll address one concern that you might have, or teachers sometimes have, about younger students. They'll say, oh, but they can't keep their attention for 30 minutes, let alone 45 or an hour. I have never found that to be the case. I've found that we teach them differently. And we actually teach them better, and the time goes faster. When we have a 30-minute lesson with a young kiddo, sometimes we practically glue them to the bench. We want them to stay there so that we can get the things done, because they keep getting distracted and it's so hard to even get one song completed. But when we have 45 minutes, we say, hey, we've got time. Let's get up and march to this song. Let's play a game to learn about this concept. Oh, you want to see what it sounds like when we press all the black keys at the exact same time? Let's see if we can do it. You know, you have that time for curiosity and you teach them better. And they don't feel like the time drags at all because you feel like you have creative time and space. The other thing about the longer lessons, which I think is crucial, and it will depend where you live, but in most parts of the world, students are not doing much music in school, if any. Here it's almost none, depending on the school. Some schools are very good about it, but it's really on them. The requirements by our government on what they do for music in schools is very lax, so most don't get any. If that's similar to where you are, consider the fact that you are not teaching piano or violin or flute or voice. You are teaching all of music. That's what we're tasked with doing. All of music, 30 minutes a week. I mean, is it any wonder we struggle? Is it any wonder? It's not possible. It's so hard, and then so much is relying on practice. And we're also dealing with students who are less available to practice because they have more after-school activities. So we need to do more reinforcement in their lessons, which means more time. So you can try different lesson formats. You can increase your lesson times. You can do rotating formats, group lessons, buddy lessons, just longer lesson times, or any other format that you think sounds fun and interesting and right for you and your students. Now I'm going to address one final concern for today, and that is parents won't do it. They won't pay for the longer lessons, or new parents won't sign up. And those things may be true, but they're usually less true than teachers think. Parents won't pay for longer lessons. Yeah, some parents won't. Some parents, when you make this switch, let's say you move to all 45-minute lessons, you need to charge for that time, okay? I'm not saying do it for the same cost. So let's say you make that switch, and you tell them why, and you explain it well. You watch my video about how to make any change in your music teaching business, or you read my article with the same name, and you really present it to them well. Some of them are going to say no. But remember, if we're talking about 45-minute lessons, you can lose a good chunk of students because you have space for fewer students in your schedule anyway. Now that might sound ruthless in the moment, but it is true. And it is the way that you're going to get what you want and what gives the best experience for your students. And the second part is new families. They will inquire about lessons, and you're afraid that if you say it's 45-minute lessons only, they're going to say, oh, no thanks. Some of them might. And they will go to the place down the street, and that's going to be a better fit for them. But I've had many of these emails back and forth, and it's pretty rare that a student says that. They might say, oh, like, I'll tell them the time, it's Thursdays at 3:45, and they'll say, oh yeah, I assume it's 30 minutes. And I'll say, no, actually, it's a 45-minute lesson, or it's a buddy lesson, it's 1 hour. Depends on the circumstance which they're starting with. Most of them will say, oh right. Some of them, parents of little students, will say, oh, I'm not sure little Johnny can focus that long. And I'll say confidently, you'll be surprised. They're not going to be sitting still for the whole time. The time actually flies by. You know, you can start with monthly payments initially. If you want to just test it out with them, that's fine. But we're fun. We're not going to just sit there for 45 minutes. You might be surprised how well he pays attention for that whole time. And as long as I'm confident about it, most parents don't quibble with me over that. That's not what happens. So tell me, is your system broken? I already know you're not a bad teacher because you're here, but have you been operating under this broken system? And are you considering a change? I'd love to hear about it.